All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube. This is Rosh, and this is another video in my series called AxeFX 3 Basics. In the comments, somebody asked about explaining how the gates work and the noise gate and why you would use an input gate versus a gate block. So yeah, I want to help you guys out, answer that. So a little about me. I'm an LA-based guitar player and guitar tech. Some of my clients include Steve Vai, Dweezil Zappa, Bush, Perfect Circle, Melissa Etheridge, and more. So this video in particular is going to be covering the noise gate and all the gating things that you can do in the AxeFX. So let's just build a basic preset. And we're going to put an output. And then we're going to do an amp and a cab. And do an amp, and let's connect the shunts. And I'm gonna just put just a reverb just to give it a little bit of space. It's probably good right there. And just do some kind of stock settings. And let's use 4x12. We use this one. Yeah, that should be good. Okay, and let's see. Do 80, and then maybe 8,500. Oops, 8,500. Okay, so this looks like, yeah, that's probably a good amp. Okay. Wow. Maybe too much reverb. Okay, so we're going to use the Captain Hook amp. Let's bring the gain way up. Let's increase the bass, and then maybe scoop the mids out. So we'll just get kind of like a hard rock tone. Could be a little brighter. Let's bring that volume up a little bit. Okay, great. So let's talk about the gate. So in the input block, it defaults with a gate on, and then it uses the intelligent gate. So if you turn all these to 0, here is like my guitar signal, not playing anything, so you can hear that. And then I'll switch to single coils. So yeah, not a great sound, obviously. And so depending on how you want to approach the noise of a guitar with some gain on it, right, you can always increase the gate. So let's talk about what these knobs do. There's two types. There's the classic and the intelligent gate. And they just kind of react differently to the sound. So what the threshold does is that after a certain volume that you set, it's going to push it's going to attenuate the signal by this ratio. So the higher ratio levels, the more it will gate the sound. And then the attack is how quickly the gate closes, and then the release is how quickly the gate opens. So if you actually imagine a real gate with a fast attack speed, that means the gate is going to shut that sound off once it dips below this threshold. So once your guitar volume dips below this number, it's going to push it down by 1 for every dB. It's going to be some type of ratio. And then this is how quickly it is. So if you want something that's a little more natural, you want to increase the attack. And then you also want to increase the release. And if you want something that's super tight, so if you're playing like really tight, intricate, palm muted riffs or something, you want these numbers to be lower. So for example, here's my threshold. And you'll notice it's not really doing that much attenuation until I start bringing this up a little bit. And then as you hear, the noise goes away. And you can see that this is kind of the ambient noise my guitar is making. I'll increase to single coils. You can kind of hear it opening a little bit. So I'll push that up, and then now it's pushing below an audible volume. If I decrease this threshold, that means that my ambient guitar signal is above this number right now, and you can hear the gate not really working. So you want to play with these values. Now, the higher the ratio is, the more it's going to push down the signal. So you see how the signal is just getting pushed down a lot more, versus if you want something that's a little more subtle, you want a little lighter ratio. Now, the attack of the gate is how quickly it shuts and opens. So if you have, let's say, the default, we'll just reset this block. Okay. So you can hear that if I increase this, and I'll turn the reverb off so you can hear how quickly it shuts. So you hear there's a little bit of noise left over when I just play the note really short. You hear a little bit of static if I lower that. It just shuts off that static a little bit. And then also the release is how quickly it opens back up. Or so if you want like super tight stuff, you just bring that all the way down. And you can hear that if I increase the release time, it's going to just close a little bit slower, a little bit, and open a little bit slower. And then you can do even wider. So what happens is the attack is the gate starts latching onto whatever the signal is, but then it just slowly decreases that ambient noise. And of course, if I set it really wide, it's going to be attenuate that noise just a little bit slower. So you want to play with these two values to make some of the ambient noise more natural. So it doesn't, mute some of the noise. Now, one of the other things that you're going to run into is, of course, if you gate it too much, then it's going to start gating the sustain of your notes. So if you actually bend a note, see, the note's going to fade away. And if you have higher ratios and higher thresholds, and you mess with this, the noise will it'll dissipate that. So for example, if I have a fast attack and a fast release, what's going to happen? See, it's a little more natural sustain rather than it just kind of cutting off the note. So you got to play with these values just to see what it's going to be. And it depends on the style of music that you're going to play. Generally, I'd use pretty conservative settings for my gate, and mainly it's just used to reduce a little bit of ambient noise from my guitar. So here's my volume all the way up. I just want a little bit of noise when I take my hands off the volume, and I usually just have a fast attack with a medium-ish release. Now, when you're dealing with ultra high gain stuff or boosted stuff, sometimes you may run into some issues where you need to gate on the back end. So let's talk about that. And also, if you're playing like super high gain stuff, or you need really tight, palm muted, kind of really, really quick opening and closing of the gate, you can use a gate block after the amp rather than in front. And then you also want to select where the input is going to be. So for example, here is the gate block, and then there's two types. There's the classic gate and the downward expander. They're just like different flavors of a gate. The expander is a little more natural sounding if you want that. And what it does is it kind of approaches the volume attenuation in a different way. It's basically reducing the volume. It's attenuating the volume rather than reducing the signal going into the gate. So what that translates to is that there's just like a different flavor of how it's going to gate. So for example, if you're playing like super tight, genty stuff, then try the downward expander, and instead of using the block left-right, meaning that you're feeding the input into the gate, actually use input 1. I'm plugged into input 1 of the fractal. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn the ratio up. We're going to mess with threshold, and then I'm going to bring all these values as low as they go. And here's what happens. So let's say we have some kind of like boosted front end kind of thing. And if you watch some of my lead stuff, what I generally do is I use a tube screamer and I turn the drive off and I turn the level all the way up. So what's going to happen is when you have this, so if you're playing those kinds of riffs, versus if you are doing the input block left or right, see how there's like some extra extraneous noise? So what this is doing is it's sidechaining with the input. So basically when it doesn't see input from input 1, it actually will downward expand using these settings rather than seeing input into the gate from here. So this is really good. And again, this is just for one particular style. So if you're playing that super heavy rock kind of stuff and with a ton of gain. So if I took this off and I turned off this gate, here's how much ambient noise there would be. Yeah, this is me with holding the guitar volume all the way up. Turn that gate on. It's off. And again. So again, it's one type and style of gating that is probably pretty popular in the fractal community if you're playing that super high gain stuff. So those are two approaches. There are plenty of approaches with the gate. And one of the main things to remember is just kind of mess with the threshold and the ratio. You don't need to, you can be pretty conservative unless you want that super tight kind of gating. If you want your sound to be more natural. So even the default settings generally in the input block are pretty good. Here's my guitar volume all the way up. Just a little bit of ambient noise, and I usually just turn the ratio up a little bit, and I usually bring the attack down. And I don't think too much about it. And again, it depends on the type of pickups you have, the type of guitar you have, and if you're playing like single coils or humbuckers. Here's my single coil sound. You kind of mess with that. And then if you want to gate it on the back end to do that super tight genty stuff, use either the downward expander or the classic gate, because they both kind of work the same way, where you can set the sidechain to input whatever input channel you're going into. Bring all these down, the volume, or the knobs all the way fully counterclockwise, and then you can get that super tight hard rock thing. And you hear that, like with the classic gate, it's a little kind of abrupt. And then the expander is a little more natural sounding to my ear. But you can hear how like the way it closes is just kind of unnatural sounding when you use the gate. Versus the expander, but you know, your mileage may vary. So anyways, that's a quick tutorial on using the gate. If you have any more questions, by all means, leave a comment below, and I would be more than happy to answer them. In the meantime, check out some of my other videos, like, subscribe, and do all that. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.